We have a price increase from Carnival Cruise Lines, and yep, we're going to have to talk about cruise passengers left behind when they are late getting back to the ship. Chris here with High Seas Cruising, and welcome to today's video, and let's get into the cruise news. First up, price increase from Carnival Cruise Lines. They are raising the price of bottled water on board the ship for a third time here in just 17 months. So you can pre-order 12 packs of bottled water on board Carnival Cruise. You have them delivered to your stateroom. They are there waiting for you when you board the ship. Put them in your fridge. You can enjoy water during your cruise. And this is a popular item. A lot of people do. But man, lately Carnival has really been kind of raising up the prices on their bottled water. Now, this began back in November of 2022. You could get a 12-pack of bottled water delivered to your room for $4.95 when they increased the price to $9.95 for the 12-pack. Then in December of 2023, they raised the price again, and it became $11.95 for a 12-pack of water. Well, price has gone up again, and now it is $14.95 for a 12-pack of water if you want that delivered to your room. Now, while that is comparable to other cruise lines, it's definitely a much higher price than there is on shore. You can go down to your local grocery store and you can get 12 packs of water, $5 or $6. And Carnival says, it's the cost of doing business. Supply, demand, what it costs for them to get the water on board the ship is the reason for this price increase, but that is a 202% price increase in just the last 17 months. Now, for those that have the Cheers package, that's not something you have to worry about because you can get bottled water from any of the bars on board the ship if you have the Cheers package. But what do you guys think? Is it still worth getting 12 packs of water delivered to your room at the new price of $14.95? Now we're going to talk about cruise passengers left behind on the cruise ship. Now, this has been an ongoing saga. This has been an ongoing story, and I kind of wanted to see how it ended before I went and talked about the entire story, because this began back on March the 27th when 8 passengers sailing on the Norwegian Dawn missed the all-aboard time while doing a shore excursion in Africa and were unable to rejoin the ship. Now, they had taken an independent excursion, so not through the cruise lines, which means the cruise lines does not guarantee the excursion. This was a tender port, meaning they had to take small boats back and forth. Their excursion was late arriving back to the cruise port, and the last tender boat had already gone back to the ship. Now, according to the couple, because remember, all stories have two sides, but according to the couple, the tour operators contacted the ship and let the ship know they were running late. They arrived back to the port and said the Norwegian Dawn was still anchored out in the port, but the captain refused to let them board despite multiple emails and phone calls. The local Coast Guard loaded them up on one of their Coast Guard ships, attempted to take them out to the Norwegian Dawn. However, they were still refused to allow to board even then. So the cruise ship departed, and now these 8 individuals were stuck there in Africa. And at this point in time, it is their responsibility, their financial responsibility, to either get themselves to the next cruise port to rejoin the ship or to make arrangements for themselves to get home. Now, the next opportunity for them to join the cruise ship was going to be in Gambia on April the 1st. However, due to weather conditions, the ship was unable to dock there. They had to skip that port, which also meant the passengers could not rejoin the ship there either. And their next opportunity to join the ship would have been the next day on April the 2nd over in Senegal. Now, since then, these 8 cruise passengers, they have rejoined the Norwegian Dawn. They are back on board the ship. They are continuing on with their sailing. And this story has gone viral, and people have a lot of different questions. They have a lot of different opinions and a lot of different thoughts on this, including the passengers that had been left behind. Now, Norwegian Cruise Lines, they were putting out statements while this was happening. While this is a very unfortunate situation, guests are responsible for ensuring they return to the ship at the published time, which is communicated broadly over the ship's intercom, in the daily print communication, and posted just before exiting the vessel. When the guests did not return to the vessel at the all-aboard time, their passports were delivered to the local port agents to retrieve when they returned to the port as per the regular protocol. So according to Norwegian, hey, you missed the ship. this is what we're supposed to do. We told you what time to be back on the board the ship. You didn't make it. This is what we did. You can't reboard. Your passports are available. We are moving on to the next port. And like I said, at this point, it is now at your expense to get back to the cruise ship or to get back home. Now, Norwegian Cruise Lines, they have stepped up, because when they were unable to dock in Gambia, the passengers then had to go to the next cruise port of Senegal. Norwegian has come out and said, look, we are going to offer assistance. We're going to help cover the cost and the expenses to get you from Gambia over to Senegal, because it's not your fault we couldn't dock. It was weather. It was out of our control. So at this point, now we're going to step in and we're going to help you. Unfortunately, the ship was unable to safely dock in the destination due to adverse weather conditions, as well as tidal restrictions that require specific timing for safe passage. While we share in our guests' disappointment, this modification was made with great consideration for their safety and that of our crew, which is our top priority. Despite the series of unfortunate events outside our control, we will be reimbursing these 8 guests for their travel costs from Gambia over to Senegal. Now, this brings up the question, who is right? Who is wrong? Is this the cruise line's fault? Is this the passenger's fault? Who is responsible for these 8 people not being back on board the ship? Now, I get, as passengers, you go back to the cruise dock, you're expecting to reboard your cruise ship, and you can't. Whether your cruise ship's not letting you back on board, whether or not your cruise ship is just gone, yeah, you can imagine that your heart's gonna sink. Your stomach's gonna start to hurt, because now you're in a foreign place, you're in a foreign country, and suddenly you are alone. I get why that would be a very scary situation. But at the same time, I understand you took a private tour outside of the cruise line's control in a place you've never been before. And that tour does not get you back to the ship on time. And the cruise line, they were real specific. All aboard is this time. You must be back on board by this time. And cruise lines are not quiet about it. It's not like it's a secret. It's not like you have to guess what time all aboard time is. They drill that into your head that you must be back on board or we're going to leave. Okay, there is a chance you are going to miss the ship. But of course, you know, the passengers that are left behind, they don't see it that way. They don't feel it that way. There's a couple that has made a statement about it. After what we witnessed, we truly believe that although there's a set of rules or policies in place that the ship may have followed, they followed these rules too rigidly. I believe that they really forgot that they are people working in the hospitality industry, and that really the safety and well-being of the customers should be their first priority, and that should be placed first. We believe there was a basic duty of care that they've forgotten about, so it does concern us. Okay, now the cruise lines, again, they've made it clear. All aboard time. That is a rigid policy. They are going to depart that port. And yes, cruise lines are in the hospitality business. Yes, the safety and well-being of those passengers should be a top priority, but here's my question. You want your health and safety to be the top priority, but what about the thousands of other people that are already on board the ship? Should their not safety, well-being also be considered? Is it not the top priority? And how long should a cruise ship wait for people that are late coming back to the cruise port? How long is too long? Is it 10 minutes? Is it 15 minutes? It costs money for cruise lines to remain in dock after they're scheduled to leave. That costs money. What about conditions that require the ship must leave at a certain time? People forget high tides, low tides, channel conditions to get in and out of the ports. That can all affect the times that cruise ships must leave. Is the safety and well-being of people who were late back to the ship mean, well, if we don't leave in the next 30 minutes, we won't be able to leave for hours and hours. We should go ahead and stay and wait. It doesn't matter that everybody else on board the ship got back on time. It doesn't matter that that there's a chance it could affect our arrival at the next cruise port. None of that matters because our policies are just too rigid. We should wait until these people stroll back onto the ship. There are reasons why these policies are the way they are. And if you start saying, well, we'll just wait 5 more minutes. We just wait 5 more minutes. At what point in time does it just become too much time for cruise ships to wait? Or is it correct the way it is right now? You are given an all aboard time. You are adults. You should be back on the ship on time. I know third party and independent excursions, look, they're popular. They're less expensive. But if you cannot get back to that ship on time, if you are concerned about not getting back to that ship on time, I don't recommend that you do that. If you are in a place that you are not familiar with, you have never been before, and don't know how things work, don't go off on an independent tour, because you very well could miss the ship like these people. Hey, your best bet is to take a cruise line excursion, one that guarantees you will be back to the ship. I feel for these people. I feel for the expense they went through, the hassle they went through, the worry and the concern of how they were going to get either back on the ship or back home. I get all of that. But honestly, at the end of the day, cruise ships, they can't wait forever. And at some point, they have to go on. Now, I do have one other question about this story, because it's one that Norwegian didn't answer, and I just would like to know what the answer is. I understand all the tender boats were gone. I understand they missed the last tender. The Coast Guard ship went out to the Norwegian Dawn with the passengers. Okay, and they were denied boarding by the Norwegian Dawn. I would just be curious to know why they weren't allowed to board at that time. Was it a safety issue? Was it a customs issue? What was exactly the captain's reason why they couldn't get on board the ship? I mean, there has to be one. I just don't know what it is. But I'm curious to know what everybody else thinks. Do you think Norwegian Dawn, Norwegian Cruise Lines, they were right in doing what they did? Do you think these passengers are right in saying that the cruise lines are too rigid in their policies and they should have been let back on board the ship? Or are you like me? I know what time all aboard time is, and believe me, I'm getting back on that cruise ship.